Okay, picture this. What if the biggest secrets about, well, aliens weren't locked away in some government vault, but being shared quietly in the Swiss Alps? Because that's kind of the core of the Billy Meier story, isn't it? This Swiss guy claims he's been chatting with extraterrestrials since he was basically a kid.
It's a story that's definitely got legs. It's fascinated people for decades, but it's also incredibly controversial.
Totally. And that's what we're going to tackle today. We're doing a deep dive into Meier, the claims, the really striking visual evidence, and also the huge amount of pushback.
Right. The skepticism is significant.
Absolutely. Stick with us on this one because honestly, watch the video until the end and you will be surprised.
So Edward Albert Meier, or Billy, his story really blew up in the 1970s. That's when these photos and films surfaced.
The beam ships.
Exactly. Supposedly alien craft flying around Switzerland.
Okay.
And these pictures got everywhere. You know the I Want to Believe poster from the X-Files?
Oh yeah, classic. That used one of his photos.
Allegedly, yeah. But, and this is a big but, we have to say right up front, most scientists, serious skeptics, even a lot of ufologists, they think the whole thing is a hoax. Fraudulent.
Okay, so that's the battleground. Our mission here is to really unpack it all. Look at what Meier actually claims, the proof he offers up, and then crucially, the arguments against it.
And just for context, the beings Meier says he talks to, they're supposedly from the Pleiades star cluster, Pleiadians.
Right, you hear that term a lot in ufology circles, often described as looking kind of Nordic or Scandinavian.
That's the typical description, yeah. Humanoid. People sometimes trace that specific image back to George Adamski, maybe one of the first big contactees in the 50s, talking about these sort of Nordic aliens.
Gotcha. And Meier didn't just keep this to himself, did he? He started an organization.
That's right. In 1975, he founded AGU. It stands for Free Community of Interests for Frontier Sciences, Spiritual, and UFO Studies. Bit of a mouthful.
Huh, yeah, just a bit. What's their deal?
Based in Switzerland, their whole thing is promoting principles for a better life, essentially. Love, peace, freedom, harmony. They state pretty clearly they're not political, not religious, not sectarian.
So more of a spiritual philosophy group inspired by these alleged contacts.
Seems that way. They talk a lot about striving for knowledge, wisdom, evolution, and specifically rejecting extremism and fundamentalism.
And the core of his teachings or information comes from these contact reports.
Exactly. He claims he's been transcribing dialogues with these pleasure-in, that's his term for them, since '75.
Wow, how many are there?
FIGU says over 700 reports have been transcribed and published, and they cover, well, everything. The universe's origin, creation, science, spirituality, lots on environmental destruction.
That's a massive amount of material. And he wrote books, too.
Oh yeah, over 45 books, apparently. Some are about spiritual stuff, meditation, self-reflection, others directly about the contacts. Titles like The Chalice of Truth, Talmud Emmanuel.
Okay, so there's a whole cosmology and philosophy built up here.
Definitely. And what's really interesting, or maybe strategic, depending on your view, is how these reporting contacts weave together sciencey sounding ideas with spiritual development.
Right. I saw that mentioned in a YouTube transcript with Ranulph Winters. He was talking about the Pleiadian teachings.
Yeah, Winters used to be a major promoter for Meier. The transcript mentions this idea of continuous evolution. Planets evolve, humans evolve, always becoming a little more evolved.
A bit vague, but okay. What about planetary evolution?
Well, according to the transcript, the Pleiadians talked about Earth having these huge, like 700,000 year cycles. Ice ages are part of that.
Like natural planetary resets?
Kind of. Necessary changes, they apparently said, to allow for more evolved forms of life to eventually develop. It's a grand narrative.
It certainly is. You know, it strikes me how often these stories of wise, advanced aliens pop up when things feel chaotic down here.
Yeah.
Is part of the appeal just wanting guidance, wanting someone to have the answers?
That's a really good point. It could absolutely tap into that deep human desire for meaning and reassurance, especially when things feel uncertain. And the Meier stuff leans into that. For example, the YouTube transcript mentions a warning, supposedly from the Pleiadians back in 1975.
A warning about what?
The ozone layer. They apparently told Meier it was being damaged and that the damage had started like 60 years before 1975.
Whoa, okay. That's quite specific for 75. Did he tell anyone?
The story goes he tried to warn scientists, but nobody listened. Then, the transcript points out, Discover magazine published satellite images in the early 80s showing the ozone hole.
Convenient timing or prediction?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The Pleiadians were also apparently concerned that we didn't have the tech to fix it back then. It's this mixed specific warnings, scientific-sounding stuff, spiritual messages can seem compelling.
It gives it an air of authority, maybe. Like they know things we don't.
Potentially. And then there's the really high strangeness stuff like time travel.
Oh yeah, what did they say about that?
According to that same YouTube transcript, Billy Billy allegedly experienced time travel. Went back to the 16th century.
Seriously, what was it like?
He apparently described the natural world as feeling completely different.
Yeah.
Fresher was the word used, like before major pollution and industrialization.
Huh. Okay, that's imaginative.
It adds to the whole mystique. But then there's this interesting concept of non-interference.
Right, the prime directive, basically.
Sorta, yeah. The transcript says the Pleiadians have a strict policy. Don't mess with worldly conflicts. They even showed Billy a vision, supposedly, of a potential World War III.
And they wouldn't stop it?
Nope. Their reasoning apparently was about letting free will play out. They'd only step in if the entire planet was about to be destroyed. Otherwise, hands off.
That's a tricky ethical line, isn't it? Watching potential disaster unfold.
Very. Although, the transcript does mention one supposed exception, this Taj ship, one of their craft types, presumably.
Okay.
It apparently zapped a runaway missile or something, stopped it cold, using technology described as completely beyond our science.
So selective intervention, only when they deem it necessary.
Seems to be the idea presented, adds another layer of complexity or maybe contradiction to their policy.
Interesting. So warnings, visions of war, but also hope.
Yeah, despite all the heavy stuff, the YouTube video emphasizes a wonderful message of hope for the future from them. They even have a special word, Salome.
Salome? What does that mean?
Peace and wisdom. It was supposedly used as a greeting or farewell in their tonal language.
Tonal language, like more than just words, maybe involving sounds or frequencies.
The transcript implies something like that, yeah. Something beyond just spoken vocabulary. Adds to the alienness, I suppose.
So where does this all lead, spiritually speaking? What's the end goal in their view?
The transcript wraps that part up by talking about a universal self. The idea is that by manifesting love, wisdom, and truth, you eventually eliminate negative urges.
And reach your
destination of existence. Pretty lofty stuff.
Definitely. Okay, now, we're about halfway through this deep dive, and I wanted to share some good news, specifically for you listening. Yes.
If you're finding this whole Billy Meier saga, you know, the claims, the photos, the controversies, interesting.
Which, let's be honest, it is fascinating, regardless of what you believe.
Totally. So, if you like this video, maybe drop a comment below. Tell us what you think. Doing that actually helps YouTube figure out what kind of stuff you're into.
Right, it helps the algorithm understand your taste, so it can suggest more videos like this one that you might actually want to watch.
Exactly. And hey, if you are enjoying this breakdown, maybe consider subscribing to the channel and share this video with anyone else you think might get a kick out of it.
Good plan, because now we need to pivot.
Yeah, we've laid out the story Meier tells, the sort of grand vision, but now we absolutely have to dig into the other side. The controversies, the criticisms, the reasons why so many people yell hoax.
And there are quite a few reasons. Let's start with those famous photos. Iconic, sure, X-Files poster and all that. But even within ufology, there's massive skepticism.
So it's not just mainstream science saying no. Oh, definitely not. Many UFO researchers themselves find the evidence problematic. An article, Insomnia Occulta, laid out some classic examples of alleged fakes, like the Asked and Nera photos.
Okay, what were those?
Meier claimed these were photos of two female extraterrestrials he met during a 5-day space trip in 1975. Problem is, they were later identified. They're pictures of two dancers, Michelle DellaFave and Susan Lund from the Dean Martin Variety Show.
Wait, seriously, dancers from a TV show, how was that discovered?
A researcher named Kal Korf pointed it definitively back in 1998. Pretty damning evidence.
What was Meier's explanation for that?
Well, his story shifted. He later claimed that, yes, those were photos of the dancers, but that mysterious men in black figures had tampered with his original negatives or photos. They supposedly inserted the dancer pictures to discredit his real photos of Asked and Nera.
Okay, that sounds incredibly convenient, like an unfalsifiable excuse almost.
Yeah.
What do skeptics make of that explanation?
Generally, it's seen as exactly that, a convenient way to explain away contradictory evidence without offering any proof of the tampering. It raises more questions than it answers, you know?
Yeah, definitely. What other photo issues are there?
There's the famous wedding cake UFO. It looks like a big multi-layered craft in the photos. Meier and his group claimed it was huge, maybe over 11 feet across. But many analysts suspect it's actually a pretty small model, made from like common household stuff. Garbage can lids, maybe furniture knobs, things like that. The perspective in the photos makes it look big.
Models. That leads to his ex-wife, doesn't it? Calliope.
It does. And her testimony is probably one of the biggest blows to his credibility. In 1997, she went public.
And said what?
She basically said the UFO photos were fakes, that Billy made the models himself using everyday objects, Trash can lids, carpet tacks, bits and pieces. And she also said his stories about meeting aliens, all made up, fiction.
Oh, wow. An insider, his own wife at the time, saying it was all fake. That's pretty hard to ignore.
It carries a lot of weight for critics, absolutely. And there's more. Remember the time travel claim?
The 16th century, yeah.
Well, he supposedly took a photo of a pterodactyl during one of these trips.
A dinosaur photo from time travel?
Okay, yeah. But researchers found an illustration in a 1971 book, Life Before Man, by his Zdeněk Burian, that looks strikingly similar. The conclusion many draw is that the photo wasn't from time travel, it was a forgery based on that book illustration.
Man, the lab of suspicious evidence just keeps growing. What about his predictions? You mentioned the ozone layer one earlier.
Right, and that one sounds impressive on the surface. But skepticism extends to his other predictions too. There was a discussion on Reddit on high strangeness, questioning predictions he supposedly made way back in 1951 and 1958.
What were they questioning?
The dating, mainly. Like, is there actual proof these predictions were made public back then? One specific example was a prediction about a dangerous drug called crystal.
Crystal meth.
Yeah, predicting it would cause huge problems in the early 2000s. The Reddit users pointed out, first, where's the public record from 51 or 58 proving he said this? And second, the term crystal for that specific type of methamphetamine wasn't really common street slang until the 1980s.
So it sounds anachronistic, like language used later attributed to an earlier date.
That's the suspicion raised, yeah. It casts doubt on the authenticity of those early predictions.
And you mentioned Randolph Winters distanced himself. Is there still someone promoting Meier actively?
Oh, yes. Michael Horn is probably the most prominent English-speaking representative now. But he's controversial too. A Reddit user on that same high strangeness thread described an encounter with Horn, calling him a cruel trickster.
Not exactly a glowing review.
No. And another user on Reddit, Inoivus, just flat out reiterated the point about the alien photo actually being a Dean Martin show dancer. That specific hoax seems to stick.
It's pretty concrete, I guess. What about FIGU, the organization itself? Is it just seen as a quirky spiritual group, or are there deeper concerns?
There were definitely deeper concerns voiced online. On the occults subreddit, for instance, someone posted worried about their grandmother joining FIGU.
Oh, wow. What did people say in response?
The comments were pretty harsh. People calling Meier a liar, saying his claims are easy to debunk. Some even used language comparing it, worryingly, to groups like Heaven's Gate. That raises red flags about potential high control dynamics.
Comparisons to Heaven's Gate are serious. Were there specific allegations made?
Yeah, very disturbing ones. One user in that Orcults thread brought up an alleged suicide pact among the core members living at the FIGU Center. The idea being they die with Meier to ensure reincarnation together.
Okay, that's extremely concerning if true.
Extremely. And there was another really serious claim mentioned, alleged Russian funding influencing Meier to push disinformation, specifically anti-vaccine stuff, anti-Ukraine narratives, anti-NATO positions.
Whoa, so potentially moving from UFO contact claims into geopolitical disinformation, that's a whole other level of concern.
Absolutely. But it's important to present the other side too. Balance, right?
Of course. Was there a counter-argument in that thread?
Yes, there was. Another Reddit user chimed in, saying they'd actually visited the FIGU Center multiple times over 15 years.
In their experience.
Completely different. They described it as peaceful, filled with lovely people who were focused on meditation and taking personal responsibility for their lives. Their take was that all the negative stuff online is basically deliberate disinformation aimed at FIG.
So a stark contrast. Either it's a concerning, potentially dangerous group built on lies, or it's a peaceful spiritual community being unfairly targeted.
That's the divide. It really highlights how polarized the views are on Meier and his organization. There doesn't seem to be much middle ground.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, what's the takeaway? It feels like a real tangle.
It really is. The Billy Meier story is incredibly complex. It's messy, deeply controversial. You've got these grand claims, scientific-sounding tidbits, spiritual teachings, all mixed up with really serious accusations of fraud. Hoaxes that seem, in some cases, pretty blatant.
It really forces you to think critically, doesn't it? You can't just take any of it at face value. Examining the actual evidence or lack thereof and weighing the counter-arguments seems crucial.
Absolutely essential. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, as they say. And here, the evidence presented is often countered by very strong debunking efforts and testimony.
Right. So again, if this whole exploration got you thinking, please do let us know in the comments. Like the video if you found it useful, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it around. It helps us keep making these deep dives.
Definitely.
And maybe one final thought to leave you with as you click away. Consider that powerful human urge. the desire to believe in something bigger, something extraordinary, maybe something from out there. How does that desire sometimes, maybe, make us vulnerable to potential deception? What does this whole saga tell us about our own hopes and maybe our fears about the great unknown?
A lot to chew on there.
For sure. There are 2 videos up on the screen right now. Click on one of them if you want to continue your journey down another fascinating rabbit hole.